right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No, I cannot hear you. I think it's your microphone. Can you rejoin the meeting? Just is it my microphone? No, I cannot see your cam. Can you see the screen? Aren't you tired of all of these Zoom meetings? I'm really glad that we're meeting in person, so all of this that happens during online conferences can be omitted, and you can actually hear me, which is nice. So I got tired of the entire discussions online, and I'm really glad that we're back in person, because online it was Pfizer's versus Moderna, Alpha versus Gamma, Beta, Delta, all of these variants, which are not even SEMVer compatible, to be honest. And I'm glad we can be back here in person, and we can discuss Redux versus something else, Angular versus React, and whatever we love arguing about. So you should do me a favor before I start the talk. Well, I'm actually talking to 7 people, so this is going to be a bit hard to find a person around you. I want to find a person, wherever it is, no matter how far they are, and just ask them. If they're next to you, even more perfect, just ask them if they work for Facebook or not. And on 3, we're all going to say the answer. Just if the person is next to you or across you, just ask them, do you work for Facebook? You probably already know if you're sitting next to each other. And on 3, you're going to give me the answer. 1, 2, 3. This would have been awkward if you all said yes, and you're all Facebook employees. I would have been like, OK, bye. Enough for me today. So 99% of web devs don't work for Facebook. The question that I'm trying to answer in this talk is, why the fuck are most web developers acting like they do? Before we go there, I'm Kitze. You can learn more about me on my website, techies.io. A lot of people describe themselves as senior ninja, rockstar, mecha, Godzilla, King Kong developers, and I just describe myself as a rectangle mover. I take rectangles, I move them 5 pixels to the left, 3 to the right. Sometimes I put z index 9, then I put z index 99. I get pissed off, I put 9999. But my job is essentially a rectangle mover. The browser that he mentioned is called Sizzy. You can check it out. You can download it and evaluate it for free. So we're building this for 2 years. And I think we have a wrong tagline. We call it the browser for developers. And people hate paying for a browser because this is a $5 subscription. So we need to find a new tagline that explains what is this, like something maybe like Swiss knife for front-end development. I have a couple of slides here, but I don't think I'm going to show it enough because we really spent a lot of effort into building this. It started as this. Maybe you know it as this. Maybe you've heard about it. You are able to preview multiple websites, multiple devices at the same time. So when you work on responsive design, you can actually see how your design is going to look like on multiple devices. But eventually, we added more and more features. Like you can simulate dark mode and light mode at the same time. So while you're fixing bugs, you can fix them across different network speeds or different languages. You can work on Japanese, English, and Italian language and simulate dark mode and light mode at the same time. Basically, it saves you a lot of time, whatever you do. If you do screen recordings and stuff, basically you can like choose any background, set any number of devices, and just show off your how your website looks like. You can easily preview how it will look like when shared on social media. One of my favorite features that I personally built was to organize all of the projects that I have on disk. And as you can see, I have plenty of projects grouped into plenty of groups. And I hate using the terminal to go to these projects. So here you can organize all of your projects. You can easily, I don't know why this is not playing. Makes it less fun. But you can easily open a project in Finder or Explorer or open it in your core editor. And I'm going to waste the entire talk if I give you all the features. So you can definitely check it out at sizzy.co. So about the talk, it might be a bit harsh, and we might not agree on everything. Actually, we're 100% not going to agree on everything. So we need to divide every slide. It's going to fall in some of these 3 categories. So some of the things I'm going to say are going to be like pineapple on pizza, right? A lot of people hate it. But there's going to be 2 people in the back. Hey, how dare you? I like pineapple on pizza. OK, you can like that. It's fine. Some of them are going to be like this, like pizza on a pineapple. You'll be like, what the fuck? Why would I? No. Next slide, please. And with some of them, we would have to agree. Like, there's no way around this. This should be illegal. OK? When we come to these slides, we just say, yep, we agree, and we move on. So when I'm going to be talking about these things, I'll be talking to you. And I'll be talking also to myself. So let's just imagine there's going to be an invisible Kitze right there in the audience. So when I tell you to stop solving non-existent problems, I'm also reminding myself, speaking to myself, that I also make these mistakes, and I want to stop doing these mistakes. So I need to remind myself. Problem number one, for example, a non-existent problem. Somebody messaged me, hey, the landing page for Sizzy eats up a lot of memory if you leave it open for a long time. And the developer ego in me is like, oh shit, I have to go and fix this right away. Like somebody complained that my work is not good enough. We need to fix it. And then I remembered, wait a second, how do we build landing pages versus how do we browse landing pages? How do we build? We spend so much time on animations, on styles, on performance, on marketing copy. Everything needs to be perfect. The fonts, the transitions, whatever it is has to be perfect. And then the user comes to browse our website. And all of us browse websites this way. You just scroll for 3 seconds until you reach the pricing section. You're like, $5? Fuck out of here. I'm not paying $5 for this, and we're gone. So nobody's browsing a landing page for more than a minute, ever, if you look at analytics. But my developer ego wants to fight this problem, and ooh, I need to solve this right away. Because we love solving these problems, because we have a lot of ego. There's this thing, if you're a React developer, which is not really a problem. A lot of people make it a problem. I'm doing basics workshops, I'm doing advanced workshops. Anytime I declare a function inline, somebody will be like, oh, this is an issue. And for this, I have to introduce a character called Horsey. So we've all been Horsey at some point. He wasn't so bad once upon a time, but the internet like ruined him. And now anytime there's something discussed in web development, Horsey is like, I think we can optimize this. And in this case, Horsey will be like, aren't these inline functions going to be redeclared on every render? Which sounds horrible, right? And in my workshops, I'll be like, yeah, they're going to be redeclared on every render. Aren't they going to slow the app down? Nah, in most cases, you'll be fine. But I read this blog post about someone from Facebook who benchmarked, but you're not Facebook. And this is where we need this reminder. You read an article by somebody at Facebook, Airbnb, Pinterest about how their app that served to millions of users, how they shaved a couple of seconds because they removed inline functions. And then I see everyone obsessed, even if you have like 3 users, we need to use callback everywhere as a rule because otherwise our app will not be performant, which is not the case. We're obsessed with all of these achievements that are actually not realistic because we're bored, I think. I don't know. Like, what is the highest achievement for us, for a web developer? You would think it's going to be solving a problem, making a user happy, making your boss happy or manager happy, just contributing and completing meaningful work before the day is over. None of these things. These are our highest achievements. This is what we want. 100% live score. Why? Nobody knows. It's performant. Somebody on Twitter said so. Our website needs to be performant. Oh, we have 7 users? Still, we have to get 100. This, shamefully, is my screenshot of having 100% test coverage. So when I started open sourcing my first library 5-6 years ago, I was listening to what Ken C. Dodds is saying about testing. And we were on a vacation with the company I worked for. And instead of enjoying the vacation, I was in my room writing 100% test coverage because somebody on Twitter said so. This library has 3 users and 7 downloads. And I'm not kidding. It has like 3 GitHub stars. But I got this achievement, right? At the end of the day, I was like, hey, this is like a kindergarten teacher just giving you a star on your forehead to send you home. Like, you achieved something, now go home. That's how I felt. I mean, I felt pretty amazing when I did it, but now when I think about it, I could have went at the beach and just enjoyed my time there. Because we're obsessed with these lighthouse scores, and nobody ever said this, ever. Nobody ever said, oh. You usually look at the design, you look at the animations, you look at if something is nice or not. But we're super obsessed with these metrics. Somebody tweeted their portfolio, like their personal website. Imagine your personal website. Who would like to browse it daily? I mean, I don't want to offend your personal website. But just imagine any personal website. It has an about link, something about my cat or whatever. And somebody tweeted this and said, the screenshot was all of their scores were 100, but it wasn't a PWA. So people in their replies were like, haha, it's not a PWA. Who the fuck is going to pin someone's website on their home screen as a PWA and browse that every day? Like, it doesn't make sense. And yet we do all of this like bundle shaming and lighthouse shaming. It's crazy. Like AirPods released, the AirPods Pro website was bonkers. Like all the animations, the videos that they used to tell the story of AirPods was amazing. And yet people nitpicked on this. I'm like, yeah, but if you open it on a Lenovo from 2003, it's going to lag. They're $300 headphones. They know who are they selling this to, and they don't give a shit if this is 65 or not, because it's going to be fine in most cases. Yet developers, we look at that and we're like, they don't know how to write code. I know how to write code. What I'm saying is we need to look at our analytics all the time, because this is a meeting and this is a sentence in a lot of companies even right now. It's almost 5 p.m. Somebody is sitting down and discussing How do we optimize our apps so it works everywhere, in every tunnel, in an igloo maybe somewhere, needs to work offline. And then if you look at the analytics, these are the analytics. Oh, so all of our users are on Verizon 5G on the latest iPhone, and we just optimize for some fictional audience that we might have. Because we don't listen. Nobody listens. Users don't listen. Managers don't listen. Like, nobody listens. This is what the users want, and this is what we craft for them. And then we tell them, oh, you should go the way, because we thought it's the good thing to do. And the user just goes like, whoop, straight. Users are like, hey, it would be great if we can. And developers are like, here's dark mode. Because somebody on Twitter said dark mode is cool, and now let's implement dark mode. When I say nobody's listening, I mean all the layers in a company, from the developer to the recruiters, nobody's listening. This is what a recruiter sent me recently. And they just replied with lol, and they just continue trying to recruit me. So when I'm saying nobody is listening, even the recruiters, it's like, what the hell is going on here? How would be the ideal scenario for building software, right? This would be the ideal cycle in every company. Users need a feature, managers plan it, developers implement it, repeat. This is what happens in every single company nowadays, ever. Don't know if you can read it, so I'm going to read it. Developers read a tweet from a thought leader in the middle of implementing a feature. They go down a rabbit hole of problems they don't need to solve. They forget about the feature. They tell their manager they need to rewrite everything from scratch. He finally snaps and learns how to code. He realizes that the JavaScript is terrible and quits. Now everybody moves to a farm and quits web development forever. And this is an issue because we have so many developers right now living on a farm because they quit because of a meeting. It's insane the process that we're going through. One of the first company that I worked for was just 5 people in a tiny room, and we worked on software. And I was eating a sandwich in my lunch break, and I was reading an article, and my boss just came to my computer, just grabbed my mouse, scrolled through the article, and said, "You don't need this," and closed my tab. And if you're like, oh my God, you should have called HR. There was no HR. He was HR, CEO, CFO, CMO. There was like 3 developers and him. And I was pretty mad, like, how dare he close my tab? I was reading this. What if I needed it? And I was mad then, but now I'm like, I probably didn't need that shit. Let's be honest, I need a person like him every day when I'm reading an article to be like, nah, you don't need that. You're just wasting time. So when I was thinking, what article was I reading? It was probably one of these. Honestly, he was 100% right to just close my tab and say, go back to work, finish your sandwich, and you don't need to read about how to optimize SVG or deploy Dockerized micro, whatever people are doing because they're bored. So we need to stop taking pride in our over-engineered apps, and I'm super guilty of this. When I made my first side project, I didn't describe the project when I tweeted about it. I described what it was built with, which is irrelevant. So to tell you, I made this website called OK-G.io, just not to trigger the assistants. We're going to all be at once like, yes. So I made this website with all of the commands that you can ask your Google Assistant, right? And instead of telling people which problem I solved, I told people I made it with Redux, with React, with Aphrodite, with Reselect, with all of these things. And Hacker News just roasted the website completely. Some people were like, oh, this is useful. But you know Hacker News. I didn't submit it myself. I would never do that to myself. Somebody submitted it, and suddenly I get comments from people like, why did you use all of this? You could have used HTML and CSS and call it a day. And I was mad because I was proud of it. But when I think about it, I could have simplified my stack. But I was hearing all of these voices. This was, I think, 2016. All of these voices from thought leaders and people with a lot of following telling you, you need to use this, you need to use that. And of course, I over-engineered the living fuck out of this website just so I can get this star on the forehead from people who, who cared about that. And if you say, okay, maybe use some of these technologies, but you needed to, right? I use Redux. You think, okay, the client state management was really complex. I had 3 state properties. There was a sidebar. It could have been open and closed, and 2 more things. And I used Redux. Then I used Redux form. When you look at it, you might be like, okay, so we had plenty of forms where users could submit their things and stuff. I had 1 search field. And this site is still live. If you think that it's not true, you can just go to the site. There's 1 search field. And in order to bind 1 search field to my store, I use Redux form. Unless we have Reselect. And you might think, oh, you fetched a lot of data probably from a backend, and then you needed to normalize it. It was completely, the data was local. It was in a JSON. And I just threw it in for good measure. I just wanted to have it in that screenshot, like, ooh, I also used Reselect, I'm smart. A lot of you are guilty of this. I wasn't guilty of this, so I'm not talking to the invisible Kitze here, because I was writing things on Medium. When I wanted to write, I would write on medium.com, and a lot of people do this. They just spend months on making their blog just for the sake of making a blog, not that they want to write. And now I'm going to expose at least 10 of your blogs right here. I'm going to show them right here. At least 10 people have this blog, right? You wanted to write. You wrote one thing in 2018, but you mostly wanted to build a blog, not to blog. So, yeah. This is me, was me, still is me. When I think about when we won Startup Weekend, me and my ex-roommates, we won in Macedonia. I'm from Macedonia. We won Startup Weekend with the most brilliant, unique idea that you can never think of, a food delivery app. But back then, there were no food delivery apps, so the judges were like, this team obviously wins, because this poor country doesn't have a food delivery app. So we won. They gave us an office. They gave us a team, books, resources, knowledge, mentors, everything that we need. And we could have succeeded. We could have been the first app delivery app. And even on the Balkan region, there weren't that many apps, and maybe we would have been big. If only there was this one thing that we did instead. So we were supposed to think about delivery drivers, motorcycles, logistics, and all sorts of things. And the only thing that we've built from this startup, in quotes, is the login form. And we were stuck on animating the SVG line. When the user is going to type in the password, we wanted to have a fancy SVG line that animates in a certain way. This is the only thing we built, because we're developers, we love this shit. We don't like actually solving problems. We wanted to animate SVG lines. So nothing happened out of that. So in all of my talks, I have this message about how we should stop over-engineering and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people hear the opposite thing. So what I'm trying to say is deliver maximum value to the user. And a lot of people are just high-fiving themselves in the audience saying, oh, told you we shouldn't never learn GraphQL. We're delivering value to the user, which is absolutely not what I'm trying to say. There are cases where you need to move to something new in order to deliver more value to the user instead of trying to solve problems which are already solved. So from this point of the talk, we're flipping the script. We're talking about stop solving the solved problems. You might want examples. What is a solved problem? Solved problem number one is a fucking button, which is discussed in way too many meetings nowadays. So there are too many solutions on how to get a ready-made button and just put it in your app, but there are meetings where 3 layers of management, developers, designers are just sitting. Yeah, I think our buttons are special, right? I think our buttons are like cornered in a way that we need to reinvent the button from scratch. Let's discuss what is a button in web development. It's a goddamn rectangle. It can be green, red, or yellow, right? It can be primary, warning, or success. Those are the 3 states and 3 colors. And yet we, as a web community, we cannot agree on this goddamn rectangle. So everyone is smarter. It's like, nah, we need to just write it from scratch. It needs to be in vanilla CSS, and we need 3 meetings in order to decide what our buttons are going to look like. It's insane. This is a solved problem. Just use any library, move on. Problem number 2, also kind of solved. Let's call this 90% solved, because I have an entire talk about this. Maybe I gave it here at this conference, I think so. State management can be a really complex problem. If you're solving state management, the problem is a lot of people solve data management, not state management. And one of the solutions, and I gave an entire talk about this, is if you just stopped using hundreds of requests with a REST API and then normalize your data with Redux, Mobx, whatever it is, if you just requested from your server exactly what you need, the state management problem just goes away. You have a little bit of router there. You have a little bit of state properties if something is open and closed. But there's not a global store where you store all of your data. So there is the solution. A lot of people are like, nah, that's not the solution. I just prefer to solve this manually. We don't want to see the solution sometimes. So many people are still stuck with Redux. I want you to move on from Redux already. Intentionally, I put the year as 2020 here so someone can say, oh, it's 2021, and I can say exactly. It's 2021, and people are still not moving on. This existed 2016. So many things were invented in 2016 for some reason. So this should have been a tech demo, and they should have shown off Redux, and all of us, I was amazed when I saw it. I should have been like, ooh, that's interesting. And then I should have forgotten about it. Boom, gone. Instead, I spent like 2 years working with Redux. That was back then. People are still stuck with over-engineering data fetching. And if you don't trust me, you're like, who's this random guy on stage telling me to stop using my favorite thing that I'm using? Here's the creator of Redux. He wrote in 2016, you might not need it. This is like a band releasing an album and then releasing a statement, don't listen to our album, it sucks. And he's persistent. He's like, they didn't listen the first time, I'm going to tell them again. He said, I'm going back to a Redux code base and I have no fucking idea. He doesn't swear, but in his heart he said, I have no fucking idea what's going on in Redux. He wanted to say that, he just doesn't curse. But if I'm being too harsh, there are 2 reasons to choose Redux in 2021, actually. If you want to feel smart about pushing a string into an array, go ahead. Because you gather by the water cooler. I mean, when COVID will be over, you'll be back with your colleagues, right? There's front-end developers, full-stack developers, back-end. And when you hear the back-end developers talk, and they're like, oh, we optimize so many layers of the database and caching and Redis and Postgres and this and that, you cannot just stand there like, yeah, I had this rectangle, and I moved it a couple of pixels, and I chose the color, right? You want to feel smarter. You want to say, oh, yeah, well, we use the reductor, reducer, profunctor, pop, funko function in order to take this string through 7 different layers and files and push it into the array. We're smart. And there's actually, jokes aside, a second reason to actually choose Redux is if you're paid by the hour. You definitely just continue coding. It's fine. I had to take water. I asked this question just to torture myself at conferences. Is there any Mobx user? Wow, this is the first one with 0. Because usually it's 1 to 2 users, and one of them is the creator from Mobx, just in a hi-hat and a mustache, just hiding. It's like, yeah, I love Mobx. And why wasn't this mainstream? This solved so much, like so many of my headaches. Why isn't it mainstream? Because people say this. Because Facebook somehow convinced people that we need functional, pure, immutable code in order for our apps to be pristine and divine, which doesn't make sense. This is what Facebook says. The only problem is you're not Facebook. For a lot of cases, mutable code would have been fine. I've used Mobx in all variations, Mobx State Tree, in whatever else they released. Yes, it's mutable, but it solved so many problems. Nobody here is using it, makes me sad. Problem number 3, this is really an important one, is styling. And it's solved. People are still solving it. While it's a solved problem, it's solved in so many ways, but you can still find companies that do this. Oh, there are solutions? No, we actually like our custom, whatever people are doing to solve CSS or to solve styling. When the solutions are out there, they're in a variety of forms, like we have Tailwind, CSS in JS, Chakra UI, Material UI. I don't have enough space here to show you all the libraries and techniques that are solving CSS, but everyone is like, yeah, but the kilobytes, the runtime performance, the this, the that, when it actually doesn't matter that much. What is your reaction when you read the title of this article? I want to see your reaction. There's one word that you utter. It's like, ew, right? This is the same reaction when I saw style components. Same thing when I saw it. I was like, what the? Who's going to write their styles into a string? This is disgusting, get it out, get him off stage. And then the next morning I was writing style components because I realized, oh, I don't have to think about any of my CSS structure or any of these problems. Somebody solved them. I'm going to wait for them to iterate. So they improved the performance, they improved the bundle size, they improved everything. But they did it. I didn't have to reinvent CSS for 5 years. I just decided I'm going to use their solution, let them improve it. And they did. And freaking Disney Plus is using style components. Disney Plus, with billions of users, is using style components. And we already went through the exercise. Are you Facebook? Did you work for Facebook? No. Ask yourself, are we Disney Plus? Are we serving billions of users? No, then we can use style components if only it was an issue of bundle size or runtime performance. Because we have Horsey saying, what about runtime performance? And when I ask, what about it? Well, Facebook just made their own library because they wanted to avoid the runtime cost. And you know the next slide. Facebook did this library for them to avoid the runtime cost for running Facebook. But we are not Facebook, so we can just take style components, use it, and not think about it. And then we have, what about the, it's probably not even 14 kilobytes. This is an old slide. And there's this quote by Gandhi, actually, that it's better to spend these 14 kilobytes than your team to spend months on over-engineering how to deliver your styles to the users. Because a lot of people are convincing you otherwise. There's this CSS magician who's doing workshops. And I've been in one of his workshops, and he said that you're losing millions of dollars. If you're not optimizing your CSS, you're losing millions of dollars. And I'm just sitting there like, am I? Am I making millions of dollars? Like I have 1,000 users in my app. I'm definitely not losing millions. But people are like, yeah, we should optimize it. We should keep it 1 kilobyte because we're losing millions of dollars. Like, this is my one GitHub sponsor. I'm making $1 per month from open source. I added this slide just to shout them out. Shout out to Lucas Munoz, who's my one GitHub sponsor, sponsoring me $1 per month. So if I lose any money, it's going to be $1 per month with CSS, not millions of dollars. I started this thing on Twitch I was very active on Twitch. I just paused for a while. I should be back soon. It's called This Week in Web Dev. People send me links, and I react to the links, and mostly it's me face palming for 45 minutes, like, what the fuck? So this was one of the first links that got sent. CO2 emissions on the web. And I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be an interesting one. Are we harming the planet with our CSS? Let's learn. So I'm going through the article, and it says, your content site probably doesn't need JavaScript. And I'm like, does it? OK. You probably don't need a CSS framework. You haven't seen my vanilla CSS, and that's why you're saying that. I definitely need a CSS. And I'm like, OK, screw all of this. Let's keep reading. I constrain myself to not use more than 1 kilobyte of CSS. This was my reaction. But it lasted for like 3 minutes. Why would you torture yourself to not, because you're fictionally somehow doing things from the planet, and you might harming it in 30 other ways. So I'm like, this person might be really environmentally cautious. Let's see what else they have on their blog. How are they saving the planet? And this polar bear thanks them for writing a bytecode interpreter in C and everything else that they're doing for the planet. And then the second link that was sent was, I don't know if you can see everything. Hopefully you can. The second link that was sent was some girl made a Polaroid camera with CSS gradients only. And the polar bear is sad because she's literally killing the planet with the amount of CSS that she used. Taking things too far. Like, this is an example of taking things too far, limiting yourself to 1 kilobyte of CSS. This is also an example of taking things too far. Who's using this? Be honest. 1, 2, 3, late 4. So I'm just going to assume, and I'm really glad that I finally met some engineers who work at Airbnb. I'm really happy that the entire Airbnb team is here. I'm not going to ask you if you work for Airbnb. 99% you don't work for Airbnb. Literally says it in the name that this was made for those hundreds of engineers that they have there, because they cannot shout out to each other what styles and what things to use. If you're in a small office with 5 people, you can literally, while eating a sandwich, be like, so want to use semicolons? Yeah, cool. That's the discussion. If you don't know, who doesn't know what this is or never used that? All right? I'm glad and you're glad. This is like, if you miss a semicolon, literally a SWAT team will enter your room and be like, put a semicolon there. It's crazy. Like, it's super strict. People use it for no reason. I can go on. I don't want to say that all of these technologies exist for no reason. Like, I can bash them to no end. I can talk about this all day if you let me here. But I'm not saying that all of these things and all of these discussions, I'm not saying they don't exist. They definitely exist for a reason. They can definitely be applied in the right teams. They can, like, they have a place, but a lot of people just read about them, see a thought leader talking about them, and suddenly your front-end website is micro-dockerized, microservice, whatever people are doing. So I'm just telling you to use them when there's actually a use case for them. And you might ask, rightfully so, Kitze, why are you so concerned? Like, are you the mayor of Web Dev City or something? Like, what's your problem with all of this? My problem is I've been through all of these issues and I've been through all of these things. Like, I realize that I'm mostly like doing this for fun or mostly wasting time, and I can actually spend my time on delivering value to the users or like shipping more and shipping faster. So we need to ship more, we need to ship faster. And this last one actually makes me sound like the mayor of Web Dev City for a brighter web development future. I really want this. Why do I want a brighter web development future? I tweeted this controversial thing, apparently. Please don't create another CLI. And I'm actually begging people here who saw this and people now that is not 1925, and we need to move on to more UI things, more automated things, not being back like in the Matrix where we're typing our little commands, right? People crucified me for this tweet. I didn't even read all the replies, because most of them were like cursing my mom and grandmother. It's like, nope, I don't want to read this. But one of the replies just stuck with me. There was one reply that's still in my head. Sometimes I wake up sweaty in the middle of the night just thinking about this reply. So this person said, UI is temporary. The terminal will be here forever. And I heard like, ever, ever, ever. So I'd be eating dinner, just picking on my dinner, just being sad. I would hear, ever. Wake up in the middle of the night. Terminal will be here forever. Fuck. Like, is it going to be there forever? Let's say 5 years. Let's say in 5 years, I'll give you 5 years. You can write CLI. 7 years, 10, 12, 30. Is it going to be there? Honestly, it's not going to be there. But this reply just stuck with me that people think like this. And we live in a world like everything is going super fast. And somehow in web development, we're still using the old things and how things were. Like Tesla released. They just announced this Tesla bot that will lift heavy things and just run errands for us and do shopping or whatever they're going to do. Probably going to strangle all of us when they hear we're using Redux. But they're doing this, and somebody said the terminal will be here forever, ever, ever. And I swear to God, I don't know about robot rights and if they have feelings and AI or whatever. If I see something running this, I'm punching it in the face. Oh, you're still running the terminal? Bye. I don't want to see you. Why? Because these are all the other industries. Probably you cannot see some of them, but focus on this one. Like, everyone has insane tools for building things, and they're building 30 times more complex things than what we're building. What are we building? Rectangles. We put them side to side. We put them in a grid. We put them one on top of the other. These people are creating universes, 3D models, physics, game worlds, AI, whatever they're doing, and they could do it with UI mostly, but we're like, our rectangles are very special. We have to write the code in that. So we're still using a text editor, and I want us to move on from the text editor to the CLI. That's why I'm so passionate about building a browser for developers, because every single feature that was built in Incisi comes from my frustration when using another browser. I'm like, this should be automated. This should be faster. This should be better. And it just turns out it's an endless list of features that we can build because we're using all of these outdated tools when we could be. I don't want to make this a CZ pitch. That was totally not my intention. But I'm really pissed off because I started following these game developers just to torture myself. Like, what are these other industries working on? And I saw this tweet. And this is made with, like, probably there's some code. There's some UI. But it's a freaking river going through an island or whatever is going on here. It's like, it's mind-blowing, right? And this is what I was working on that day. And I'm like, somewhere we're fucking this up. Like, they cannot use UI, and we're using a text editor. They're solving way more complex problems. How do we move on? So me, as a mayor of Web Dev City, obviously, I'm going to tell you how do we move on. Embracing innovation. I don't see this enough in the web dev community. When there's something new, everyone is like, no, I want to be protective of the old knowledge. I want to be protective of what I had or what I learned. So when this was released, you could see that same reaction across humanity. You're like, yo, but cars weren't like that for billions of years. Why would someone reinvent the car, right? This is style components. This is Tailwind. This is GraphQL. This is all of the things that might be a solution, that might be better, but people are just so protective. They don't want to listen. They don't want to hear this. How I see it is, just imagine when electricity was released. Not released, yeah, like it's a GitHub thing. They published electricity on GitHub. When electricity was invented, there were so many pissed off candle makers, right? Imagine your entire life depends on candle making, but now people can just go and just flick a switch. Nobody cares about the candles anymore. And candle makers were like, but what do I do with my knowledge now of HTML and CSS? Well, it's exactly like that. When you hear people ranting about something new, they're mostly saying, what do I do with my knowledge now? And I've been here. Like when people are talking about Web 3.0 and blockchain and crypto and NFTs, I'm like, nah, it's not going to be the future. Well, I'm like, oh my God, I need to learn all about this, right? Because I'm protective of what I know now. I want to store my data in a goddamn database, not on the blockchain. So embracing innovation is one way to move on. Otherwise, and this is my favorite slide. The otherwise is my favorite slide. You've seen this, right? Who has seen this? Who's scared by it? You should be. When I say who's scared by it, all of you should raise your hand, but you're not, because of developer ego. I had in my previous talk 7 slides where I'm explaining that AI is going to replace us, AI is going to help us as developers, and slowly is going to kick our ass out of the door. While being a developer, it's not going to be a rock star. Like, we're in a fucking castle. We're like rock stars, right? We're sleeping in a castle. We're doing a conference at the castle. This will help us out the door. And I needed 7 slides to explain it. When this was released, I just let out an evil laugh, like a muhahaha. And every morning I'm practicing, after brushing my teeth, I'm practicing this evil laugh for the day when this is going to replace us. I just can't wait to tweet out, told ya, because I'm talking about this for 5 fucking years. And I know, everyone's hesitant. I'm a little bit hesitant. I'm like, is it better than us? And to prove it to you, I don't need 7 slides. If you're like, yeah, but we're humans, we're intelligent, we're better than AI. Are we? Are we? AI is going to practice code all day, is going to think about code, and we're like, oh, crates, let's climb them. And if you still think like, yeah, but this is a stupid example, I'm still smarter than AI. People in the middle and people in the back. Is this a dog or is it a bagel? Right? You're squinting, you're like, well, I don't know. AI, going to replace you. People maybe in the front. Is this a chihuahua or is it a muffin? Right? Like, you have all of these examples. We have self-driving cars that are driving on the streets, but we think that for our rectangles, nothing is going to replace us. Why? because our ego is the worst. We have the worst ego ever. This, that they put us in a castle to talk at a castle, is just ego plus plus for everybody. Yeah, I'm hanging out at castles. You know, it's just CSS in a castle. This is every pull request ever, just because of ego. They're like, no, I'm smarter. No, you're smarter. No, I'm smarter. No, you're smarter. Like, this is just going in circles for things that don't matter. And when I mentioned this, just to prove it to you, this should have been called anxious, because when I mention it now, Axios, people are like, oh, what the fuck? Isn't that thing from 13 years ago? And if I say, God forbid, I say this, there's nothing wrong with Axios, immediately in the audience is like, what the fuck? Well, there's fetch, and why would you waste kilobytes? And Axios is... This is all the developer ego talking with something that doesn't matter. And to prove it to you, I tweeted this slide before giving the talk, and somebody said this in the replies. Still that 4 kilobytes you don't need. When you mention Axios, could be a solution. I'm still using it in some places, perfectly fine. All right, so before we summarize the talk, I would appreciate it if I'm leaving in a couple of hours, so I would love to talk to you here. And I know that all of my points are not 100% right. I would love to discuss some of these points with you. If we don't have a chance to talk, you can find me at Kitze on Twitter. Usually have pretty spicy opinions on all things. Sometimes I'm clickbaiting. You can find me at all of these other places. I'd appreciate it if you try Sizzy. And now we can summarize the talk. We should, us and the invisible kids in the audience, stop solving non-existent problems. Solve problems are the worst. Stop taking pride in our overengineering. Lego, well, this sounded better in my head, but it's lame. Lego of our ego. Follow me on social media and check out Sizzy. And last but not least, when you're over-engineering something, just think that you're not Facebook. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.